Hey everybody, it's Charles, your hobby hero, and today we're going to be talking about some changes in the grading costs and names of some of the services that CGC is offering. If you haven't already though, before we get started, please consider hitting that subscribe button. I do appreciate it, and I do put out regular content about the hobbies that I love the most. Now, CGC is coming out with a ton of changes across the board for all really their grading processes as far as tiers for comic books, magazines. I'm really just going to be focusing on the comic book changes, mostly because I think that's what most people are tuning in for, and also a lot of the other changes reflect very similarly to those changes that they're making on the comic book side. So rather than just going through and reading every itemized list and making this a really long video, we're going to stick kind of with just the comic book stuff. We're going to talk about the one really good change that they've made, some of the not so good changes that they're putting into place, and one really bad change that can really affect a lot of comic book submissions that are going to be out there. Now keep in mind, these changes do not go into effect until May 2nd, so any submissions put in before May 2nd will still be under the old CGC guidelines. So you do have a couple more days after this video goes live to get those submissions in if there's something that's going to be negatively affected by any of the changes that go into place. So first, we're going to go into some of the fee changes that they have implemented. These are all going to be an increase in price. They did not decrease the price on any of these services for the comic book grading. It's not a surprise. They've been on about an annual to biannual price increase since 2020, really, as that popularity of these grading services pick up. I don't foresee them retracing on these anytime soon, at least anyways. First and foremost would be their modern tier, previously $24 per submission. They have raised that $1 to a $25 even submission. Not a huge change here. Most people are probably mentally putting it in as $25. These prices, should note, are all before discounts are applied if you have any of their membership discounts. Economy tier has had a name change and a fee change. It is now a vintage tier, which is what it was always kind of known for before, for your older books pre-1975. Has an increase of $2 up to $37 from $35. The standard tier has had its name changed to the high value tier. This is what you would use for books over that $400 threshold for a modern tier and economy tier, all the way up to a $1,000 threshold. They've had an increase in $5 for the grading fee. It's an $85 fee now, up from $80. Now this is probably the worst change for individuals that are out there, and we're going to get into why in a little bit more detail here in a bit. But the express tier, which was kind of that tier from 1,000 to 3,000, which used to be your walkthrough tier, has been completely discontinued. So now there is no tier between your standard tier and your walkthrough tier. And your walkthrough tier has been changed to the unlimited value tier. And if you weren't familiar, this used to have a 3% minimum or a 3% or $150 minimum for that tier. It has been increased to a 4% or $150 minimum. And we're going to get into a little bit on why that's so bad with the elimination of the express tier. But for the last little bit of a price change on here, their grading pre-screen has gone up $1 from previously $8 up to $9 now. But here is the one big positive change, as they have gotten rid of the minimum requirement for pre-screening. Now, if you weren't familiar before, you had to submit 25 books and submit them all for the same pre-screen grade. So like you send 25 books in and you say, hey, all 25 of these need to hit this minimum grade or don't grade those books. So let's say you had a combination of near mint books. Some you were okay with getting 9.4s, some you were okay with getting 9.6s, and some of them weren't worth grading unless they were 9.8s or bust. If you wanted to get the majority of those books graded, you'd have to set your pre-screen for 9.4 and just kind of keep your fingers crossed on those 9.8 requirements ones. Now, you're not going to have to. You'll be able to put in one book and one book only, pre-screen that grade for whatever grade you want, and go from there. Now, submission-wise, I do want to see how that looks on the submission sheet. Their old submission form, you used to have a little drop down and you could change the pre-screen to what you wanted it to be. their current submission form, you have to put in each pre-screen grade as a separate submission. I'm really hoping they don't do that going forward, because I also don't know how that will affect shipping. So if I send 25 books in, which if you did not know is the maximum number that they will ship together once graded, and they're all 25 different pre-screens, do they go to different departments for different pre-screenings, like 9+, 8+, etc., and will they all be getting shipped back differently now? That has yet to be seen, and that would be a huge detraction, obviously, from sending in small orders of miscellaneous pre-screen grades. So hopefully they allow them all to go in and be graded together, pre-screened together, and shipped back together, but we don't know yet. But again, as of May 2nd, I'll play around with that and we'll see if there's anything that needs to be updated on here. Now, going back to the real big negative, that it may not seem like a huge deal, but the elimination of the express tier, that tier that used to be in place for books from $1,000 in value to $3,000 in value, is now gone, with everything above $1,000 going immediately to that walkthrough tier. Not a huge deal. I mean, obviously a 4% fair market value still hurts if you're submitting a $10,000 book. It's a $400 grading fee for one book. Doesn't feel good. Nobody's gonna want to pay that amount. However, the thing that really is going to affect people is those people that are submitting books that used to be in that express tier because of that $150 minimum fee. So for example, if you have a book, let's say, that is just slightly above that $1,000 amount, say like $1,500 book that you're submitting, that's a $150 minimum fee for that book. So you're actually paying 10% of that fair market value for that book, which is a huge price increase from where they fell previously in that range. So be careful with those books on those values. Again, CGC's not historically been a huge stickler for books that are on those fringe parts, but those books from that like $1,000 to $1,500 range are going to be the ones that are going to be most heavily affected by that express tier change. Now, you can go onto their website, check out the remaining changes that they've put in place if you're more interested in what they're doing for the magazine tiers and their concert posters. Another important item to remember, though, is another name change is, if you're familiar with CCS, their pressing service, they have changed that and abandoned that brand, and now it will just be called CGC Pressing, which makes more sense for people who are coming that aren't maybe as experienced with what CGC and CCS were doing in the past. But now it's all going to be wrapped under that CGC brand. So that's something to keep a lookout for too. If you are submitting your books to CGC for pressing, CCS is no longer who you'll be sending the books to. You'll be sending those to CGC Pressing. So let me know down in the comment section below which one of these changes is going to affect you the most. And until next time, guys, Hobby Hero out.